I'm Renee Marie Smith with FifTV, a trending 50 web series about 50 entrepreneurial women in America. We're here today in the home of Sarah Harrelson, founder of Cultured Magazine in Miami Beach. Thank you, Sarah, for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be with you.
Sarah, so many in the audience are meeting you for the first time. What can you share about yourself that they wouldn't be able to research and find on the internet?
Let's see, from the age of 5 to about 20, I rode show jumpers competitively. Actually, some of my most important friendships are from riding horses to this day.
At what point in your life did you decide that your interest in fashion and culture intersect with your desire to be part of the media and publishing world?
I think I first identified sort of being interested in style when I was a teenager. As I said, I rode horses, and I remember very vividly seeing Kelly Klein all the time, dressed beautifully. And I remember sort of, admiring that even, at 14. My brother was a model, my brother was on TV, my brother was really in the fashion world. And when I was in college, I was like, I don't want that. I studied political science. I was like, I don't want to be in his world. And I interned for Governor Cuomo, which was enlightening on many levels. But I went from that internship to an internship at Elle magazine, where I stood. I didn't even have a chair, but I stood. And I think at that point, even though I'm not sure I could articulate it, I sort of identified that I felt more comfortable in the style world, the magazine world, the publishing world. My brother was also dating a very famous Vogue editor at the time. And I remember living in New York City where I went to college, and they came off the red eye one night and came to my apartment, and she was like so chic. And I just looked at her and I thought, like, I want to be like her one day.
And you talk about your first job as you pivoted into Elle magazine and you were an intern standing all the time. What would your advice be to a girl in your shoes now that's interested in getting in the publishing world? Is that where she should start as an internship?
I think it depends. I think the world has changed. The world of publishing has changed. I think there's so many different careers now that overlap, whereas I think as when I started, it was a more traditional trajectory with magazines and publishing. We see every day people who've had 20 years in publishing moving into, working for Instagram or working for museums, and I think we see the opposite happening as well. But I would just say, it's about experience, and I think that, just being aware and being in an environment where they learn how to interact and ultimately learn how to work would be my advice. It would be more about the environment than the actual setting.
And you mentioned the, social media and the internet. How is that impacting the publishing world?
Well, it's turned it upside down for many things. I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot is, when I started in magazines were presenting, photography and imagery that really people couldn't see elsewhere, on some level. And now with, Pinterest and Instagram, we talk a lot about the eye being bored. People are exposed to so many more stylized images than they were when I started my career. So it's one of the things that when I'm presenting the magazine and when I started Cultured, one of the things I wanted to do was sort of break all the rules that I learned and, present the magazine in a different rhythm, present images that were different than how other people were presenting them. So I think that's one way. And the other way is, we're 24/7 content. I mean, we're constantly producing, and I think that is amazing, and there's so mmany things happening, but it's also, it's a lot of work all the time. So it's changed, and it's I think going to continue to change.
And your motto is hard work trumps all. How did you develop that?
Sometimes I think that's ingrained in you. My mom and dad both had their own companies. They worked incredibly hard. I watched that. And I think sometimes it's one of those things that you have or you don't. As I've watched people that I've worked for, that have worked for me, as I've watched people be successful in various fields, I really think at the end of the day, it's hard work and persistence. I know with starting Cultured, it's definitely persistence. It's sort of, continually going back, continually believing in what you're doing, and, as I tell my kids a lot, being sort of impervious to negativity. Because we're all human beings and it's hard and you get told no and you know, it's hard, and I think you just have to keep pushing forward and working hard.
So after several decades in the publishing industry, you decided to be an entrepreneur and publish Cultured magazine. What led you to that decision?
It's so interesting because, you know, it was never a dream of mine. I never dreamed to have my own magazine. Absolutely, I was, you know, an employee. I had amazing jobs. I did start a division at the Miami Herald, which was the closest I came to actually learning about the business of magazines, because they let me in on the P&Ls and things like that. But I think what happened was, and I think this happens to a lot of people in any career, is I just hit a point where I was a little bit bored. I've always been fueled by creativity and inspiration and storytelling and all those things, and you know, I'm a student of magazines. You know, when I met my husband, I had a collection of magazines and he had a collection of magazines. And I had read every magazine, I think, starting when I was 16, and I had just reached a point that I was like, I'm bored by what I read. I'm bored, I want to do something different. And I didn't have this, you know, huge goal of, you know, what I wanted, you know, where I wanted to go or any of those things. I wanted to present stories in a different light. I wanted to present stories without having the constraints of a company.
And Culture magazine, by any standard, has been successful. You've received national acclaim for the product. You know, it's been in business now for 6 years. I mean, that's quite a saying. And like you said, the internet has been quite a disruptor to publications. But what about Cultured magazine do you find the most pleasing and that you're proud of?
I mean, I think there are many things. I mean, I'm obviously very proud of the team that I've created. I'm proud of the relationships that I have. And I think what still gets me the most excited is just meeting these incredible creative, you know, whether it's an artist or a curator or a designer or an architect, meeting these people and then having sort of the privilege to tell their story and telling that story accurately, you know, over and over again. And I think representing such a diverse group of people who are, I think, at the forefront of, you know, whatever they're doing, whether it's painting or sculpture, and them trusting us enough to tell those stories.
And you're also involved in philanthropic endeavors. I know that there's several children's organizations that you've supported through Cultured magazine. What inspired you to take that turn as well?
A couple things. I have incredibly creative kids. My son is incredibly creative and focused on the arts, and I think, you know, it can be a harder path for some of these kids. So it's important to me to try to give back in any way that I can. Young Arts is actually an organization that I'm not necessarily involved in, but I do support with the magazine. I think having 3 kids and now having 3 teenagers and the travel schedule that I have, I do try to prioritize my time, you know, my personal time to be with them first. But these organizations like Breakthrough Miami and the Bass Museum and Anderson Ranch that, you know, are supporting artists or teenagers in the arts, these are very meaningful to me.
And you know, it's one of the goals at Trending 50 to start a discussion about what success is to women today. You know, roles are changing, the internet has opened up all different kinds of careers. How do you, Sarah, define success in your life?
I think it's such a hard question, and I think I would probably, you know, answer it differently, you know, at any given decade. But I really think for me, success is, you know, being present with my kids, happy kids. I think juggling it all is just sort of doing that alone is successful. I'm not tied up in any sort of traditional trappings of success. I feel, you know, lucky not to feel any of those. But just, you know, happy kids, happy teenagers.
And that's quite an accomplishment. It's quite an accomplishment. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking time for FifTV today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
This is Renee Marie Smith. Thank you for watching FifTV, a Trending 50 web series. If you enjoyed the video, hit like and share.